Good afternoon, good morning to all of you. I'm joining from New Delhi to speak on this very important topic on an invitation from Mr. Brewer. I'll begin with the idea of the Global Civilization Initiative that we have recently seen, which is encouraging an inter-civilizational dialogue. Before that, we have seen initiatives from China coming in, like the Global Development Initiative, which focused on development largely, and the Global Security Initiative, which focused on the security aspects. One of the initiatives which have been taken by China in the security aspect that has been brokering that peace deal between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which we have recently seen. The present one, which is about the Global Civilizational Initiative, is about largely focusing on the inter-civilizational dialogue and strengthening the people-to-people contact. There has been largely advocacy on at least 3-4 issues in this Global Civilizational Initiative, which I will talk about. It talks about that the country should uphold, principles of equality, dialogue, and inclusiveness among the civilization, and the cultural exchanges should be such that it can transcend clashes and it can lead to coexistence, so that countries do not have a feeling of superiority among themselves. Now, when we look at the other side, we find that we have been listening to things like freedom and dignity of man, liberty, equality, and fraternity. Those are also some of the aspects which have governed human understanding for a long time and still continue to do so. And at the same time, when we try to relate it with one can visit the War Remnants Museum in, for instance, Vietnam to exactly know what this idea of freedom and dignity of man holds like. So therefore, it's very significant that China has come out with something like encouraging an inter-civilizational dialogue, which can actually improve the understanding between various civilizations. And I think this is the time which has come that there are certain, narratives which has come from the West and particularly the United States as well, positioning China as an adversary, which is not finding a suitable place in the political discourse today, because many countries who are otherwise compelled to believe that China is an adversary are somehow not able to believe it. They are being, this is being the West trying to propagate among the allies, among its own allies, to buy this particular narrative. But it forgets that most of its allies are actually dependent on China for various means, whether it is related to geo-economic or related to the security or geostrategic aspects. Therefore, these things are actually putting the clash back in the civilizational narrative, which should be done away with. Now, as we just heard that what the ambassador was talking earlier about, that BRI attracted the 3/4 of world countries, countries of the world which have tried to become part of the this BRI. Now, if you look at all the BRI corridors and try to see that how does it contribute to the civilizational linkages, surprisingly, whether you go from China to Mongolia or Russia, or you're going through the new Eurasian land bridge, or you're going through West Asia and Central Asia and other regions. Of course, there is one region which is the CPEC, which is China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, to which India has strong reservations based on the sovereignty issues. But then if you look at corridors like Indo-China Economic Corridor and all, there have been substantial work which have been done. The Laos train, which runs from now Laos to Kunming, have actually tried to connect people from Indochina to China. There are several examples related to that, which has made significant contributions in terms of bridging the civilizational, gaps and trying to connect civilizations. Another point which this Global Civilization Initiative talks about is joint advocacy of a common values of freedom, and countries should actually refrain from imposing their own model on others, and they should avoid ideological confrontations. Now, when we look at the national security strategy of the United States, once again, which came, and the defense strategy, which came in 2017, around when Mr. Trump was the president, it clearly talks about that China is trying to create a model which is against the US values and interests. Now, the point is that is any country not allowed to create a model which is against American interest? I mean, this is where the whole idea of freedom and equity and equality and relations between countries and inter-civilizational dialogues are being questioned. I mean, every country, I think, is free to come out with its own model of governance, which it thinks is the best one, and which it thinks that other countries can follow and worth replicating by other countries. Countries cannot follow an economic governance model based on what the United States want or what is subservient to the US interest. So therefore, I think when we are talking about the common values of freedom, when China is coming out with the ideas that they should countries should refrain from imposing their own model on others, and they should avoid ideological confrontations, I think it makes immense sense in today's scenario. If we look at the post-COVID situation, and we look at the trade and supply chain issues that we have been talking about, now, if you just ponder on a single question that in a post-COVID scenario, which country mended the supply chains? Which country reconstructed? Because of whom the supply chains got reconstructed? Because of which country the supply chain were restored? And answer, of course, is not United States. The answer, of course, is China. So therefore, it is very important that if you look at issues coming up like the supply chain resilience initiative we have seen, which wanted to reduce the dependence on Chinese supply chains at one point of time in the COVID times, it didn't work actually. It didn't come to a pragmatic, gains and pragmatic conclusions which it was supposed to give. China plus one, there was a huge, buzz about China plus one that is trying to reduce your dependence on Chinese supply chains and also trying to relocate a part of your supply chains to some other country, for instance. Now, if you look at China plus one, it was again a costly affair for the countries and they could not be following it because many companies, multinational companies, despite getting a lot of incentive, we have seen Japanese government giving incentives to Japanese companies to move out of China, and still it was not happening. Even the US companies were not willing to move. So if we are talking about peace, justice, and common values, I think this type of, this promotion of this type of, differences in terms of approaches that you take to different countries is not a very civilizational, thing, and it is against the cultural aspects which is promoting universalism in human understanding. What presently the United States has tried to do. Now, the third point that is about the inheritance and the innovation of civilizations, and country needs to actually harness history and culture, and they need to push the creation and transformation of their traditional culture. There have been various initiatives we have seen, like if we look at with India, we have a Mekong Ganga cooperation, which is a cooperation between the civilizational aspects of people living along the Mekong River and the Ganga River. So there are a lot of initiatives which have been done in the last 23 years, because it was established in 2000. So in the last 23 years, several initiatives have been undertaken in terms of establishing civilizational interlinkages between the people who are living along the rivers of Ganga and Mekong. At the same time, we have seen that if you look at this aspect, we have seen infrastructure financing becomes a very critical issue. And BRI has been largely, accused of debt trap and all these things. The reason becomes very simple, that if you look at what is the Western alternative? Or is there any alternative? That is one issue. When we come to alternative, we have seen just recent ones in last 2 years coming up, something like the B3W, which is the Build Back Better World, which is a $40 trillion infrastructure financing supported by the G7, and then Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. But then this $40 trillion money is to come from the private sector. The issue is, why is the private sector going to make an investment in an infrastructure financing to the tune of $40 trillion, and who is the one who's going to regulate it? So therefore, these type of initiatives are definitely not an alternative to the Belt and Road Initiative. The promises, the initiatives which are put forth through the Belt and Road, I think the B3W or Indo-Pacific framework, they are not going to compete, though they are trying to position themselves against, the BRI. Also, if you look at the debt trap narrative, most of the time we look at only two sides of the narrative. One is what does China say, and other is what does the West or the United States say. There is a third idea of the narrative as well, which is about the recipient country. The recipient country too have a narrative. And that narrative is that they want money to build their financing, to build their infrastructure, whether it comes from the United States, whether it comes from China, or whether the World Bank is going to finance them, it doesn't matter to them. Now, we have seen that the World Bank and other international financial institutions have put very stringent norms on so that these countries are not able to actually get loans sanctioned for infrastructure financing. And therefore, we have seen emergence of things like the New Development Bank or the BRICS Bank or other type of, Asia in infrastructure investment banks, and all these things coming up. These are actually not because the developing countries want to contribute to infrastructure financing, but because the World Bank and financial institutions have largely failed to deliver, in fact, especially for the countries of the global South. And lastly, I'll talk about the last point, which is about the people-to-people exchange. And this becomes very important because people-to-people exchange is one of the ways of, confidence-building measures. Here, whether you talk about the Belt and Road Initiative, is connecting almost 3/4 of the countries of the world through various ways, whether it is by roadways or railways or, multimodal transportation system, or building, special economic zones, or various other ways. And another point that I wanted to highlight here is about the issue of film diplomacy, which is very, very critical in the pursuit of people-to-people, connect. Because what happens that when we talk about cinema, it can actually connect the young people of various countries. And if I talk from an Indian perspective, we have very good, established film industry. So it connects the young people of India and China and even other countries of the world, and tries to strengthen that linkage between them. Also, we see that there are many pragmatic, possibilities of film diplomacy that we tend to ignore. I'll just give you an example that in September of 2014, Chinese President Xi Jinping visited India and signed a film co-production treaty in New Delhi. And the same year, China was the focus of international film festivals. So I think this is also one of the critical areas in enhancing people-to-people contacts, which remains very crucial. And somehow we have to look at this aspect as well. And this is going to promote mutual understanding and friendship, and advance the progress of human civilization as envisaged in the Global Civilization Initiative, which has been initiated by China. So I thank you for your attention.